Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about Bruckner's First Symphony. Now, this is kind of an interesting pick because, you know, the early Bruckner symphonies don't get as much love as the later Bruckner symphonies. And the First Symphony is especially problematic, of course, because, oh, poor Bruckner, it exists in two versions, the Linz version and the Vienna version, basically, because the Bruckner people, in their endless wisdom, have discovered or decided unilaterally that there is a pre-Linz version, the original version of the First Symphony, which is basically the same as the Linz version, but, you know, it's like more original in some bizarre way. And so life can become even more complicated. And what makes it unbelievably complicated is that all of these versions are being made out of a symphony that no one especially cares about. So, you know, when a work needs special pleading, as the first does, because of its reputation, not because it's bad music or it's actually formally perfect and far more shapely than some of the symphonies that came later. It's a beautiful, beautiful work, but it doesn't have, that reputation. And the Bruckner people are doing their very, very, very best to ensure that this symphony looks even more inept and amateurish than it really is, by publishing dozens of versions or arguing about little textural details. Oh my God, it's just unbelievably bad. It's musicology run amok. It doesn't serve the composer or the work. So let's set that aside for a moment. The First Symphony is a lovely piece, whichever version you choose. Günter Wand always preferred the Vienna version. Most people prefer the Linz version, which is, it's fresher sounding. It has a bit less fussy detail along the way. It has bolder contrasts by and large, but they're both beautiful. But I greatly prefer the Linz version. Generally, you can take your pick. Certain conductors have had affection for this piece, which is strange because nobody cares. And they should, because it really is it's such a beautiful symphony. Anyway, Claudio Abbado had a special feeling for this symphony. He recorded it 3 times in both of its versions, both of its main versions, not the ancillary versions or the Tuesday version or never mind. So, but somebody else had great affection for this work, and that is Wolfgang Sawallisch, with the Bavarian the Bayerisches, let's do this right, the Bayerisches Staatsorchestra, on Orfeo. And it was recorded in Munich over 3 days in October 1984. 3 days they spent on this. 3 days. See, nowadays what would happen is that they would set up the microphones for a live performance, and if it sucked, well, they don't care. They issue the record anyway. That's the way the record business works now. But back in 1984, they actually took the time to do it right. And the result is a splendid performance. You know, the First Symphony really does have a special character all its own. It doesn't have any formal hesitation. It doesn't have grand pauses. It does have, Bruckner's tripartite thematic setup in his outer movements, in the sonata form outer movements. But it really just has this wonderfully special character. And remember, Bruckner was in his 40s when he wrote it. He was not a young guy. He was a very, very, very experienced composer. And this is really the outcome of all of the work that went, before. All of his endless years of study and writing pointless exercises and working at this and that and his insecurities. And then out popped this symphony. Now, right after this, when he started doing 2, 3, 4, which had all the different versions and additions and problems, he started becoming the mature Bruckner with his own feeling for form and shape and mass, and it was quite radical. This is not. This is almost the logical outcome of Schubert's great Ninth Symphony, the great C major symphony. It's in that lineage, in that tradition. And if you listen, for example, to Schubert's great symphony and then listen to this, you have a wonderful feeling of continuity. It's really, really exceptional in that respect. And so, yeah, the piece does sort of exist in its own world. And most of the serious Bruckner people who, really cared about Bruckner managed to do decent performances of it. Schulte did a very good one. Joachim did a couple really good ones. But they're overwhelmed by what came later. It really is. Sawallisch, on the other hand, he only recorded, what did he do on Orfeo? He did 1, 5, 6, and 9, I believe. And the outstanding performances are 1 and 5. They are amazing. Absolutely stunning performances. And it's interesting that they are in some ways the most peculiar of all the Bruckner symphonies, the ones that are they're not just the most Brucknerian, but they're the least like anyone else, even the rest of what Bruckner wrote. And Savalish just nails it. The tempi are perfect. The orchestra plays absolutely beautifully. The adagio sings. It's not too slow. The whole performance has energy and a certain lightness that Bruckner was very soon to abandon in the way he handled his form and phrasing. And so if you can still find this, it's marvelous. Now, Orfeo, the label, is actually owned by Naxos. I'm not sure what's happening with the Orfeo catalog, how much of it is still available, but the label itself is now owned by Naxos. It was originally owned by Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau and others various times. So it has, quite an interesting lineage. And there were so many fabulous live recordings that were licensed from like the Salzburg Festival and all that. And my understanding is that some of those licenses have reverted, so I'm not sure where the catalog is. But this was an original Orfeo production. The sound is terrific. And the performance, like I said, is really wonderful. And it's a great way to get to know the first, because it's not going to get lost in a big box of later, more famous works, and works in some respects in quite a different style. This is a disc to savor for itself, by itself. And I think that's really a great way to appreciate some of the less familiar symphonies, actually. So I would give this a shot. It's Sawallisch with the Bayerisches Staatsorchestra on Orfeo, if you could find it. It is absolutely beautiful, and so is the work. Let's give it some love, shall we? So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.